First, a quick note from our sponsors. Me. All 4 of our Midship Century feature-length DVDs, including our latest, Torn Castle, are now available for streaming or downloading. Please go to www.midshipcentury.com/video for more details. And now, on with the show. At dawn on day 5 of our cruise, ACHILLE LAURO entered the harbor of Alexandria, Egypt. I'm not sure what happened at some point prior, but the 3 half-sunken ships near the breakwater weren't a very welcoming sight. Meanwhile, off our starboard bow, Amun-Ra offered up a hazy golden sunlight, illuminating an interesting variety of ships, most thankfully still afloat. Like 651 passengers did exactly 9 years, minus 8 days prior, we would be heading off on a full-day tour. But unlike those passengers, we would find ACHILLE LAURO waiting for us in Port Said. On October 7, 1985, after departing Alexandria, the ACHILLE LAURO was hijacked by 4 PLO terrorists who diverted the ship to Syrian waters and killed passenger Leon Klinghoffer. The incident would have a devastating effect on Mediterranean tourism and the ACHILLE LAURO's reputation for years to come. And then, like a pot of gold at the end of a charred rainbow, a vision of loveliness beckoned. The strikingly beautiful Egyptian State Yacht MAHROUSSA has had an incredibly long and diverse existence. Built in England on the Thames in 1865, the 478-foot vessel was originally 55 feet shorter and driven by 2 paddle wheels that were replaced with triple screws in 1905 when she was lengthened for a second time. The oldest active superyacht in the world, MAHROUSSA is now largely used as a training ship for the Egyptian Navy. Almost as soon as we boarded our English-Dutch dual-language excursion bus, ACHILLE LAURO was already preparing to sail off to Port Said, where we would rejoin her late that evening.
And I would like to know, I know the majority are from Holland. I would like to raise your hand for the whole Holland people.
After a ride through the urban Egyptian sprawl, we caught our first glimpse of the 4,600-year-old Khufu pyramid. As the coach headed up to the Giza Plateau, the tour guide warned us not to accept a camel ride under any circumstances. Someone was obviously not taking the tour guide seriously. Thankfully, with a little luck and some bashkish, it all worked out. Once again, I had to hand it to the ACHILLE LAURO, this time for bringing me on my first visit to the legendary City of the Dead. Our time at Giza included a hurried photo op in front of the Sphinx, followed by far too much time at a tourist trap papyrus and souvenir shop. And then a stop at Memphis included lunch and this extraordinary apparition.
No,
And then it was on to Sakkara with its fascinating step pyramid built for Pharaoh Djoser in 2700 BC. Our last stop would be the Mosque of Muhammad Ali, overlooking downtown Cairo. We then joined a convoy of coaches for a night ride through the Sahara Desert to Port Said. The Egyptians had one more chance to sell us things we neither wanted nor needed as we clambered along a network of vendor-laden pontoons to get back to the beautifully lit ship. Fortunately, we were on one of the first return buses and spared too much of a hassle.
Get out of the way, please, baby.
After a quick late dinner, we were back up on deck as ACHILLE LAURO once again prepared to sail. On the bridge wing, Captain Orsi watched as a tug hauled off the pontoon. In just under 2 months' time, he would be supervising the ACHILLE LAURO's final evacuation off Somalia. With all safely on board after a long day in Egypt, our ship sailed off to Ashdod. We awoke to find ACHILLE LAURO berthed in Ashdod, where another long day of discovery awaited. Soon we were off on excursion to the key sites of Jerusalem and Bethlehem. Our first and rather unexpected pit stop was an Elvis Presley-infused gas station and diner just off the main highway to Jerusalem. For me, it became a little nostalgic when I encountered a photo of my mom's ex-beau, the late Charlie O'Curran, a choreographer who worked on several Elvis films. Once inside Old Jerusalem, we took in the view of the Dome of the Rock, then paid a visit to the Wailing Wall. From there, we walked in the footsteps of Christ along the Via Dolorosa. Another highlight of our long day was a visit to the Church of Nativity in Bethlehem, with its silver star marking the spot where Christ was born. We made it back to ACHILLE LAURO at nightfall and watched from her upper decks as she sailed for Limassol. After 2 long tour-filled days, we had a full morning in Limassol to document some interesting cruise ships and ferries, and even pay a visit to 2 of them. The second ship to join Cyprus-based Lewis Cruise Line's fleet, the PRINCESA CYPRIA, was built in 1968 as the DFDS ferry Princesa Margrethe. After being sold to Far East owners for a stint as the Lu Jiang, she was bought by Lewis for short cruises from Cyprus to Israel and Egypt in 1988. The Princesa Cypria was a popular ship that helped establish Lewis, which today operates as Celestial Cruises. Once her passengers had disembarked, we walked over for a pre-arranged visit. Although I would see the Cypria many more times, This would be my only visit to her, save for a quick climb aboard during her scrapping at Alang, India in 2005. She was a handsome ship as built, but the addition of extra decks and a funnel extension did her no aesthetic favors. We entered on Deck 2, Car Deck. Not including this level, the 9,984 gross ton ship had 6 passenger decks. Our first stop would be the reception area on Deck 4. The Cypria's accommodations range from original upper and lowers to relatively spacious new suites. While some traces of her original Scandinavian woodwork remained, most of her interiors were the typical, if cheerful and highly reflective Greek trappings of the late 20th century. A prime example of this style was the ship's largest public room, the Ledra Lounge, on Deck 6. Directly above on Deck 7, there was a similarly appointed Idalion lounge and disco. Princesa Cypria had 2 casual dining venues. The Tamassos Restaurant was located on midships Deck 5. And up on forward Deck 6, the Curium dining room was being readied for soon-to-embark guests. The outer deck areas began at the top of the ship on Deck 8 with a glass-fronted observation terrace and a sun deck. On Aft Deck 8, there was a wet area with showers but no pool. Although she had her limitations, the Cypria was immaculately maintained. On the Deck 7 fantail, there was another sunning terrace, and on either side of Deck 5, there were finite sheltered promenades. Right on time, our next ship to visit came rattling in. Paradise Cruises Atalante was a genuine classic, having been built in 1953 as the 3-class Tahitien for Messageries Maritimes Marseille de South Pacific service. In 1972, Tahitien was sold to Greek operators and renamed Atalante. In 1992, she was bought by Paradise Cruises and rebuilt at Perama with superstructure additions that spoiled her looks but kept the old dowager active until late 2004 when she was scrapped at Alang. We had a bit of a wait while Atalante's passengers disembarked, giving us a chance to document the arrival of 2 more interesting ships. The ship that started it all for Lewis Cruise Lines, the Princesa Marissa, was one of 4 Wärtsilä-built ferries for Finn Lines. She began her career in 1966 as the Finn Hansa. Similar in design to the pioneering cruise ship Bohem, now the Scientology ship Freewinds, the former Finn Hansa was bought by Lewis in 1987. She sailed as the popular and immaculate Princesa Marissa until being scrapped at Alang in 2008. Another interesting arrival was Salamis Line's NISSOS KYPROS, which was built in 1958 as the super-modern Swedish State Railways ferry, Trelleborg. In 1993, the ship was sold to Salamis Lines, who operated her between Limassol, Haifa, and Piraeus until 2003, when she was scrapped at Alang. We would barely scratch the surface on this first hurried visit to the former French colonial liner. After climbing her long gangway, we were met with a small team of the ship's staff who would escort us through the then 40-year-old time capsule of a ship. She was such a hodgepodge of decorative styles, but her vintage features, including crystal light shades and punka louvers, were definitely not of this era. Our host first showed us some suites and cabins, most of which dated from various 1970s Greek rebuilds. Unfortunately, the lush wood paneling in her reception area had been painted over to achieve a lighter, more modern look. It would be a few more years before her grand staircase would get a similar painting over. But at least for now, her Jules Lelou designed Art Deco-style stair railings could continue to evoke early post-war French passenger ship design in a backdrop of genuine amber-toned wood veneers. Lelou was one of several designers who contributed to the legendary Normandy of 1935. At the top of the stairs, we reached Aeolus Deck, which was dedicated to public areas from vastly different eras. The show lounge was a completely new space at the time that replaced the much smaller first-class observation lounge. But from the lobby directly aft, the ship was still largely the Tahitian. The small casino on the starboard side still boasted its wonderful molded ceiling, crystal fixtures, and melamine panels depicting Vietnamese and Cambodian monuments. The Atalante Bar on the port side was another magnificently original space paneled in figured oak. Wide promenades on either side, sporting a mix of cane and plastic furnishing, had been glassed in the ship's latter years. The aftermost enclosed space on Aeolus Deck, the Dionysos Bar, was another incongruous mix of old and new. We were even granted a quick visit to the museum-like bridge and chart room before exploring the open decks. On the uppermost sun deck, which was a crew-only space, there was a nice view of her domed Luscrew funnel. From Sundeck, there was also a good view over her aft Lido, which boasted 2 open-air pools. Atalante was one of those mysterious veteran ships that I marveled at as a teen ship enthusiast, so the chance to visit her was something I didn't want to miss. I would eventually sail in her several years later, and will dedicate a full feature on her at some point soon. With just moments to spare before Achille Lauro's first all-aboard call, we reached Atalante's completely rebuilt dining room. Our host kindly offered us something to eat, which we devoured before thanking them and literally running off to the nearby Achille Lauro, just in the nick of time. Limassol and its constant panorama of vintage ships would soon become one of my regular haunts. But it was Achille Lauro that brought me there for the first and most memorable time. That afternoon, as our blue ship set course for Rhodes, we headed to the beautiful Comet Theater to watch Voyage of Terror, the Achille Lauro affair, starring Eva Marie Saint and Burt Lancaster as Marilyn and Leon Klinghoffer. It would be shown in several languages for the rest of the cruise. The following morning in Rhodes, Achille Lauro berthed next to the Princesesa Cypria and across from the beautiful 1929-built yacht Haida. The Japanese-built ferry Sea Harmony II was the next to arrive. A sister to the Princesa Marissa, Dane Sea Lines Dionysos was the former 1966-built Finn partner. She was scrapped out of Lang in 2004. After the frenetic pace of the past 3 days, we ventured off on a relatively short tour to the scenic hillside ruins of KYPROS, dating to the 6th century BC. Our second stop was the Valley of the Butterflies, which are actually colorful tiger moths.
Allora, queste sono le farfalle. These are the butterflies of Rhodes, okay?
Ma è viva quella?
Sì, ancora un po' viva. Sì, ancora un po'.
Back in the old harbor, we watched as Poseidon Line's Sea Harmony II sailed off. Originally the Ishikari Maru, she was broken up at Lang in 2006. It truly was fair winds and following seas as Achille Lauro sailed onward to Piraeus. Out on Sundeck, there was a vigorous aerobic session that I chose to skip for some cherished alone time. Achille Lauro was at her best in her watery element, with her bow pointing towards the setting sun. The day may have been over, but our adventure would continue.